Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into what is essentially a chilling biological true crime story, and it's unfolding right inside our very own bodies. We're going to map out the exact physiological toll of global pollutants. We so often talk about pollution as something happening out there to the planet, but the reality? The ultimate battlefield is actually human biology. The invader might be unseen, but the toll is incredibly real, and today we're going to break down exactly how it operates. 6.7 million. That's a staggering number, isn't it? Well, that is exactly how many deaths the World Health Organization attributes every single year just to air pollution. 6.7 million. That makes it our unseen invader, silently contributing to millions of premature deaths globally. To understand how we can possibly fight this threat, we first really need to understand the anatomy of its attack. Section 1, Pathways of the Unseen. Let's look at exactly how this hostile force actually breaches our bodily borders. Okay, let's dive right into this. These pollutants don't just politely knock on the front door. They mount a highly coordinated, multi-pronged invasion. Through the air, we're inhaling culprits like PM 2.5, nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, and ozone. Then the water we drink serves as a direct pathway for heavy metals, think lead and mercury, along with various industrial toxins. Even our soil and food chains expose us to things like industrial plastics and agricultural fertilizers. And finally, chemical pollutants like tobacco smoke and endocrine disruptors, while they bypass our macroscopic defenses entirely to directly run cellular and hormonal interference. It's a masterfully coordinated invasion from all sides. The mechanics of these airborne particulates are honestly kind of terrifying. Take PM 2.5, for example. Because it's literally microscopic, we're talking a fraction of the width of a single human hair. It acts exactly like a Trojan horse. It completely bypasses our physical lung barriers. It doesn't just sit up in the upper airways. It penetrates deep into the lungs, slips directly into our bloodstream, and once it's in there, it triggers widespread systemic inflammation. It literally uses our own circulatory system as a highway to transport the invasion throughout the entire body. Section 2, the immediate shock. So what happens right after these invaders cross our borders and trigger localized skirmishes? Well, right after exposure, your body immediately throws up barricades. You might get stinging eyes, a sudden headache, unexplained nausea, or even severe coughing fits. When you think about acute respiratory infections or a sudden asthma attack, you have to realize these aren't just random illnesses. They are your body's desperate, initial attempts to repel the attack. It's basically the physiological equivalent of barricading the doors and sounding the sirens. Section 3, the chronic siege. What happens to us when these short-term impacts scale up into a lifelong, inescapable siege? This is where those short-term skirmishes escalate into a full-scale war. We transition from immediate, relatable irritations, like a bit of dizziness or a cough, straight into massive systemic devastation. Now we're talking about chronic diseases, like stroke, dementia, and cancers, that permanently compromise almost every major organ system in the human body. Prolonged exposure to these invaders manifests brutally. That systemic inflammation we talked about earlier, it continuously wearing down our blood vessels and lung tissues. This leads directly to strokes, ischemic heart disease, which is where blood flow to the heart is restricted, and hypertension. And in the lungs, it forces chronic conditions like COPD, lung cancer, and permanently reduced lung capacity. The body's vital engine is essentially being choked and worn down by the constant presence of these microscopic invaders. But the devastation absolutely does not stop at the heart and lungs. It moves right into neurological and reproductive damage. This invader manages to cross some of our body's most highly secured fortresses, the blood-brain and placental barriers. By breaching the blood-brain barrier, ingested and inhaled pollutants contribute to severe neurological disorders. We're seeing links to cognitive decline, dementia, and developmental delays in children. And by crossing the placental barrier, they attack our very future, leading to devastating prenatal effects, like low birth weights, miscarriages, and congenital anomalies. Furthermore, extended exposure to specific carcinogens, things like benzene, arsenic, and dioxins, is the tragic missing link between chemical pollutants and various forms of cancer. When the body is subjected to a prolonged siege by these specific toxins, whether that's coming through the air, the water, or the soil, cellular mutation is often the end result. The invader is actually rewriting our cellular blueprints to cause destruction from within. Section 4. The most vulnerable targets. Because in this biological warfare, we unfortunately face vastly unequal exposure.
Certain groups definitely end up taking the heaviest hits here. Children, whose organs and immune systems are literally still developing, face a much higher risk of developmental delays and respiratory issues. The elderly, with aging immune systems, are highly susceptible to the chronic diseases we just outlined. Pregnant women face severe exposure risks that directly threaten the developing fetus. And urban populations, well, they face incredibly concentrated exposure to vehicular and industrial emissions simply by stepping outside their front doors. The invasion disproportionately harms the exact people least equipped to fight it off.
Section 5. The cumulative global toll. The sheer scale of this invisible invasion brings us to a pretty sobering global climax. When we step back and look at the big picture, the World Health Organization data makes it abundantly clear. Pollution is the second leading cause of noncommunicable diseases, right behind tobacco. It is a massive, systemic human health crisis, not just an environmental issue. It's quite literally one of the leading drivers of global mortality and suffering on the planet right now. And here is the crucial takeaway. These pollutants are almost never isolated threats. They create an overlapping, crushing weight on our respiratory, cardiovascular, and neurological systems all at once. We really can't look at air pollution as separate from water or soil pollution when they are all ultimately arriving at the exact same destination, our bodies. Now, the good news? We aren't entirely defenseless. Fighting back just requires a multi-layered defense system. We absolutely need stricter emission standards to cut off the invader at its source, and rapid shift to clean energy to protect our airways. We need comprehensive waste management for our soil and water, and most importantly, robust public health awareness so we can all protect ourselves. It's a comprehensive strategy for a comprehensive threat. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to ask yourself one final, absolutely critical question. We've seen the anatomy of the invader. We've traced the physiological toll from a sudden cough all the way to systemic chronic disease. Are we ready to treat our environment like our lives actually depend on it? Because the biology makes it crystal clear, they do. Thanks so much for diving into this with me, and keep seeking out the clear, structured truth of how our world really works.